in the game, it doesn't look like there's a lot, but under the hood, I created a system that's actually really nice that you want to know about. Um, and I'll have all the code posted in my community for everyone it'll be available for everyone that joins the community. So you can have access to this. So let's say this guy. That's the side. We made some modifications to the deck setup. This guy's the second player. Do any of the decks. Ready. Okay. So we have all these guys. There's one card that has an effect to move. So I have to keep drawing cards until I find it. It's this Hermes card. So if you look at it, you'll see I put it here. And what the effect does is it will add 2 power at the cost of 2. So I can move this, I can pick it up and move it on this side. And it will gain 2 power every time I move it. So if you notice, it'll shift around. And so this was really hard to do. And if you look over here, everything's updating correctly. Yeah, so the Hermes card was the hardest because it moves around and it gains 2 powers. So every time it moves, let me show you. So see how it'll use 2 favors to move around, but it'll gain 2 power. So super OP, right? So I can move this on and off until the timer goes, and I can play, then try to win here, and then it's gone, right? So that's the. Oh, and then did we tie on that one? I don't know. I'll have to watch the replay. But all these fields, in order to test, what I did is I changed it to one field only, because when I had a bunch of fields flipping up and down, it was really hard to keep track of what was going on and what was supposed to happen with these cards. All the other cards just have numbers, no effects. And we only have one field in play. This field will allow me to it decreases the cost by 1. So see, I have 1, 2, 3. So 4, I can lay down this card to be able to lay down that card. So every card costs 1 less. So let me show you. So I have this 7 card, and then when it hits 8, I'll be able to put this card down because the cost goes down by 1. Okay, and that's kind of off. Something happened. So there's a bugs. So sometimes they're like this one got stuck there. It should have been able to place it there, and I have to figure out what the bug is. But overall, everything is working except for a few little bugs here and there where the card, like with dragging the card, because sometimes there's clicks that happen when I'm going back and forth between the screens. We get some bugs because I'm in 2 games at once, and so the mouse over is buggy because it doesn't detect the hover over or the button up, and so then it loses track of what's going on. So it's on application pause or on application lose focus. So when application loses focus, I should just release the car. So those are things that I can add to later as a polish. But I want to show you some of the stuff that I did. One lesson that I learned is that if we're going to do moving cards, I would probably do it a lot different. I would maybe make zones, and instead of clicking and dragging them, I would just select if I want to move a card from a different location. It was really hard to keep track of all the locations and who has what card and giving authority, because as you remember at the beginning, during the other tutorials, I gave authority the card to the first player regardless of which card is which, and so I had to change that so that now the second player had the ability to move cards, and that created a lot of chaos as to who had authority, who can despawn the card, and who can move it where and what. And so yeah, so there's a lot of stuff that I need to show you, but the first thing I want to go over that you'll is something that comes from this project called Chop Chop. This is from Unity. Unity, they created this. They created a playlist or a project, an open project that's still available, I believe. And in one of these projects, they created these scriptable objects that communicate with the player. So I'll leave a link below, and you can go through these episodes, and they have addressables, they have scriptable objects, some cool things in here. The game architecture with the scriptable objects, and they go over their details and what they do with their scriptable objects. So it's really cool. So what we did, or what I've learned, and This is from someone that I worked with. His name is Austin. He's an amazing um, coder in person. So I'm going to share some of the stuff. Um, and here we have, as you can see in here, we have Endgame Devs as a tool, and we can generate scripts called event channel scriptable objects. So the things that I want to go over is the wizard setup for Unity that creates these tools. So this is a tool that creates a tool that then creates an scriptable object. So it can get confusing. So there's the wizard setup, there's the tool, and then there's the actual event listener. Okay, so here's how it goes. So we have in the company assets, we have the scriptable objects for the events, the scripts. So the main thing is that there's this base class. This one is really simple. There's nothing to it. It's just a way to create a class that has the scriptable object and the text area. So this is specifically for like the script for the description of the tool because it can get confusing. And then in here in the editor, Scriptable Wizard, because you have to have scripts that are specifically for the editor have to be in an editor folder so that they don't get compiled. And so this is what happened is we have these templates. So we have an event channel, an event channel listener, and the editor. The reason why we have these is because each scriptable object has a task. So there's, like I say, it's kind of like a radio signal where one will send an event and the other will receive it. Right? So one is sending a signal and the other one's listening for the specific signal. And so these templates are for the different parameters. So like, okay, if so Austin, what he did, he created these scripts so that we could set it up with different parameters. So if we wanted 0 parameters, 1 parameter, 2 parameters, 3 parameters, 4 parameters. So if we wanted more than 4, he could create another template, but it was too much. So at that point, he said, like if you need more, create a struct that has more parameters within that, and you can send that across. So these are just the template. So what happens? The scriptable wizard, the wizard editor, will use this as a template to create the parameters, and these names are the things that you are gonna use the tool to create, right? So which parameters go here? So in for example, I'll show you how it works, and you'll see why we do certain things, because in here it'll fill that with those different parameters, type and name. So this is just a template. Again, the template for the listeners. So these are the listeners that will listen for specific channels and will respond, see on enable, on disable, and it'll be ready for that. And so these are pretty straightforward. But again, in Chop, if you'll find they don't have the same like structure to create these, Austin created the tool to create more because it seemed like it was a little bit tedious to go in and create the listener and the thing and the receiver for both, or listener and the sender for both of these channels. So instead, he created a tool that would create the matching listener and the matching event channel. Okay, so that's why he made this. Okay, and this is the editor tool for raising the event, the layout. So this is in case we want to not practice or like send the event without having an actual event so that we could test it. You can test it in the editor. And it will make more sense as we go along. This is the event channel. He set it up so that we can have a generic one and a game one. So if you have, because this is again a tool that creates a tool. So it's kind of crazy. You might have some specific events that are specific to the game and some that are specific generic that you are gonna reuse. And so that's what's going on. And then this is specifically the structure for like saving the files, the scriptable object. So this creates the scriptable object that then you use to create the event channel. So I'll show you. But basically, we need to make sure we write them in the location. So this is specifically to your folder, and then you have like the company name, the company assets versus like your game assets and then it has all of them saved in the scriptable objects. So I'm going to show you right here. I don't have any because I think it's all under this. So if we go local, scriptable objects, and then we have the event, we have an event that I created. In here, let me check where the scripts, events, scriptable objects, editor. So they're not in here, but they should be in here. You have description base, editor. Okay, so in here, we have the scripts that are created. So these are the scripts that I create and the scriptable objects, event listeners. I'm going to show you how it creates. So now we're going to go over that wizard. Okay, so remember, these company assets and then local is where they're stored. Again, this is a tool that creates a tool. So we're going to go over how we go. So let's say I need an event, and we're going to do this right now. So an effect that I have to do is when a player, there's a card effect. When someone dies, you can spawn that card by the location of this other card. So let's say we have Zeus, and Zeus has an effect that when Hermes dies, it spawns a Hermes card where Zeus is at. So Zeus can summon dead people as they when they die. It summons that card to the field in that location if it's available. Okay, so let's say that's the effect. Someone has that effect. I don't know who, but so what we need is an event, and I decided, okay, how do I know which card to spawn, right? So I have a string for the ID of the card that I need to spawn, and the ID is usually the name of the card. So let's say we have Hermes. So anytime any card dies, I need an event called sends a string, and it doesn't need to get a callback because it doesn't need to remember that. So only need one parameter, and it has to be a string. So I don't have that right now, and so we're gonna create it, and I'm gonna show you later how we would find out if that exists. But we're gonna go in here. Okay, so I know I need that. I need one parameter, and it needs to be a string. So we have this create event channel. This is that wizard script. So the channel name will be whatever the name of the event. And I'm not thinking like it's hard to visualize this because at first until you use it you don't realize what you're doing. And so remember, this is a tool that creates a tool. This is not creating the specific event for summoning or dying, right? So this event is a generic event. So this is a single parameter event. So you can use it how you want. I technically say string no callback because there's no callback on it. So it's like it's one parameter and this parameter is a string. So you could say, like, you can name it single parameter string, and you could call it that if you want it, single parameter string. I guess that, yeah, single parameter string. So that's what the event will be. It'll be in the game. If you wanted to like say a specific folder for like card effect, you don't need to because this is specifically for the game. If you wanted if I wanted a string, a single string parameter is pretty generic. So you could put it in general and say like universal scripts or something for the folder if you wanted to save it as to reuse them, because you could use them in any game. But this is not just for this game. Remember, I just need a tool right now. This is where I'm creating a tool. It's an event, and this is the namespace for the game because it's going to be for the game. And then the reason might be because maybe we need to figure out if I'm doing a tool for the company wide, I would want to double check with the higher up or a lead and say, okay, do we agree that this is a good name for the tool that we're going to create, right? So that way we can name all the tools the same so that we don't have weird naming conventions, because I fall victim to that where I create things and they're awful name, and because we already use them, we're afraid to delete them, right? Because it might break other stuff. And so I tend to just save it in the game. And if I want to create it for a company-wide thing, I would then say, okay, like I think this was really useful, but what would be the best name for the tool? And then we can use that tool and save it in the company folder that we can reuse. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, so the parameter, this is the type and the name. Remember when we saw the variables? So we have type. This has to be a type in it has to be spelled right. So if I spelled string like this, it won't recognize it when it'll give us errors. So it's a string and it's a single, right? If we need 4 parameters, we can just add more, right? That's why it has different templates. So it's a string and the name is the string parameter. I don't know. You can call it whatever. I think the naming, it can't be spaces. There's a lot of things that we could polish with the tool. He created this on a fly, and I think this is amazing because I am not good with wizard editor scripts. But anyway, so we have the type string, and I'm just going to call it the string parameter because it's whatever this single parameter is. And so you'll make the event listener and the raise event button. The raise event button is that thing that we talked about. It's like an editor script that will create a button so you can test it. And you can send whatever string as just a test option. We're going to create it. It will probably throw errors. It's recompiling because it created scripts. And again, remember, this is a tool. Now we're going to go over actually using the tool. These are just, there's some stuff that with the files, but they're all there. Okay, so if I go in here, events, so we have, oh, it's not in here because it probably, oh, I created the tool in the game. So I should have done it in general. Created here, single parameter string event channel. Okay, so it's okay. It created it in here in the, I should have done it in general as a global parameter. But we're learning, and that's why I'm trying to show you what's going on, so you can see it how it's run. And then now I need to think of where I'm going to create this, okay? Because we created a tool, okay? Now we're going to use that tool to do what I told you we're going to do, the summoning. Okay, so we have the TGC sample. It's going to be local. It's not going to be multiplayer, and it's going to be a scriptable object, and it's part of the card or card effects. See how it has destroyed less powerful cards here? That was me testing things. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna use this tool that we just created to create a scriptable object. So we created a scriptable object, and it should say events, because card game is the other scriptable objects, events. So we're gonna create an event, and there's the single parameter string event channel. Okay, so I know that this is single event, okay, and now I can name it summon dead ally. Let's call it like that. Okay. So in here, see, this is where the description comes into play. That description is part of this. So let's say used, we raises event with the name of dead ally. Okay, so maybe we should call it dead ally event channel. So, because we are not summoning with this, maybe we'll create another one for the summoning if we need to. But for this event is raised every time someone dies. The dead ally event. So this tells anyone that's listening, hey, I'm dead. And then anyone that needs to do something with that can pick it up. And then here's the string parameter. And I think in here, look in, this is where like it stores the parameter, okay? Then, okay, so we have that. And then now we're gonna, okay, how would we use this, right? We created the tool now, we have the event. So let's go into one of the cards. So let's add it to all the cards. So all the cards will have an event. Multiplayer, I think it's here. So we have the network card, because that's when we know we for a card, right? So this is the network card that everyone has. So what we can do in here, in here, I'll just add it as a serializable field, and we have that string. What was it? Single parameter string event channel. So this is the channel, and then this is ally dead event channel. So now we have this event. Okay, we don't have to worry about where it's gonna go. All we know is like we're gonna, and see in here I have this for that one, reward remove card. And this one is an int, string, and boolean. So it has 3 parameters. Instead of saying 3 parameters, I just spelled out the 3 parameters that I have, and I mentioned there's no callback. That's how I like to do them. It's not the best, by no means. Yeah, it's just a matter of preference. And so in here, and this is not widely used, just so you know. So it's just something that we learned from that tool, and we created it. And now I'm using it all over because I love it. See, like when we remove the card, we erase the event, and that's it. And I don't have to worry about it. It works, and we'll go over that later when we in the video. Okay, so let's say it despawn right on here when it's destroyed the card. We only want to do it when the player has state authority, or we want to, or we apply undestroyed regardless. So regardless of who it is. So yeah, so we're gonna, yeah, so one thing that I've realized now that we might have to change is, so let's say I would do it here, right? So let's say event. So I just realized that I made a mistake, right? So one thing that we could do is every time we have a path now, we have to make a decision. We either I either say, did we destroy? Because this on destroy will happen on both the first player and the second player, regardless of who owns the card. And I have times where the first player owns the card for the second player. If that makes sense. Unless the second player is moving the card, I don't give him authority. So what we could do is two things. One, I can check which player this is and just do the right move, depending on who it is. Or the other thing is I could create a 2-parameter event that says, okay, like send a destroyed card event, but give it 2 parameters: the string, the name of the card, and then a boolean to see if it's the first or second player. And that could lead to other things, right? Because if we want a card that gets stronger as it kills monsters, that's a good one, but it might be a different event for that. Um, anyway, so the other thing that I just realized also is that we might need to, if someone's going to summon cards, how do we determine the order in which they're summoned, right? And so now we have to figure out order and how do we like keep the track of that order. That's too crazy. But anyway, so we will not worry about that, but I'm going to show you how it would be done. So in here, I would erase the event. I need a string, item ID or something. What is the name? Save it in here somewhere. We have the card info and the card name in here, but there's the card ID. It's a network, so that way both have it. So that's a good way to keep it sure it's there. Card ID is the string, and then this will work. Then the one thing that we could do is if let me see, is first player. If it's first player card, we would check. Well, the only time we need to check is if it's a second player. If it's the second player, we would have some issues. But let's say most of the time, we can say the player has. What we could do is just fix it and say every time the card spawns by the second player, we'll just give authority to the second player. All it could. And I'll show you where that's at later. But right now, so if it doesn't have state authority, don't do anything and just raise the event for the person that has the authority. So this will always work for the first player. It might not work sometimes for the second player. So I have to keep that in mind, make a note, and fix it. Now, the second half, so this is going to work in here. I have this as a reference, and I click it, and then that's that event, okay? And this is the remove from the field event, because I used it as an event to keep track of things. Now, let's do the other side. Let's say, okay, so now the thing is, the card is the one that's going to listen. So these network cards need to be listening for that. So the same card, it's just that it's a different card, not this one. I mean, I'll show you. Okay, so let's say now we're going to type in event listener. Oh, let me move myself from here. We're going to type in here event listener, and we have the single event parameter because that's what we're going to be listening for. And then we're going to grab that dead ally event. Okay, so we're going to be listening, and it's going to raise again, like we said, it's a single parameter, it's just a string. So now I'm going to go to that network card. I don't have a function. So this is for the listening side. And even though I don't want you guys to get confused because it's in the same card, it's in here, it can be anywhere. You just have to keep track. You just have to know that it's going to be receiving it here. Okay, so now here we can do, let me see, I think I have one. I like doing click and drag logic because I had to do the click and drag for the network. Okay, so in here, region, event listeners, function. Region. Here I would do public hard died. Like that. Whoops, sorry. Avoid like death, string, hard ID. And then in here, we can do a switch in case there's multiple. I'm just going to do it. Unless you need to, don't do this. There's no need. Okay, and then in here we have card info, and this we use now. Maybe I need to. Oh yeah, I haven't. We created these abilities, so we have summon ability. So if this card info has summon ability equals ability type dot summon ability. Okay, so if this card has the ability, we have different types of abilities, and then if card info dot summon ability is equal to, and that's where we would do the switch. So like if we would do the switch between all the, okay, so here, and it's kind of crazy because I don't like doing if statements within if statements, but there might be a better way of doing this, but well, dot summon ability. And then, so we go through all the summon abilities, and depending, I don't need to do this either, because I could just say, does it have a summon ability? Yeah, let's do that. I could care less. If summon ability is, and then in here, summon abilities, we have destroy enemy with less power, move all cards. Oh, okay, sorry, my bad. The summon abilities are for when the card is being summoned. So in here we need death, or what are the abilities? Ability, ongoing ability. I think it is. So ongoing ability, and let's see, card info abilities dot. Okay, when ally dies, revive here if you can. Okay, so in here we would do, let's see, check zone to make sure there are spaces. Summon card and spawn on field. And so this would be called as cards are dying, and whoever gets first here first gets summoned. So the main thing that I would check is if 4 cards die, if what happens when they spawn. Like, does this thing check in time, or is there a delay? We'll see. So check, make sure there's spaces. Spawn card on the field. Maybe we would take what happens when 4 cards die, and then summon card on the field. So those are the things that I would do in here. And that's it. I don't have to like look for it. I don't have to figure out which card died where, what. It just, there's, when this card dies, it'll send the card. The other cards are all listening, and so if there's 2 of these type of cards that have these abilities to summon, it will revive it there. So let's say you have this card on 2 different fields, and you have one field that's loaded with people. The moment they die, they're gonna send a signal, and they're gonna spawn on both sides of the field. If that makes any sense. The main thing is that you don't have to worry about it. It works, and that's the beauty of these listeners, that they act just like any effect would. You want effects to be a little bit modular and be able to work on their own without you having to figure it out, all the complexities, right? Because if I were to like drag and drop these kind of effects, like the references, it would be hard to figure out. Oh, like I gotta keep track of who's dying, who's not, where, who has what effect, and this makes it so much simpler to just, if someone dies and you have this ability, do what you need to, and that's it. Okay, you can do also, maybe you can have abstraction to give classes special abilities and whatnot, but this is, for me, it works. So let's dive in. Now that I showed you how these event channels, okay, let's finish it in here. Now make sure I save that. In the next lesson, I'll probably go over, I'll finish this and I'll show you, but then I'll just say single parameter. Then in here, it should have the, oh no, in network card, here it should have ally death, and it'll send that. So I don't have to do it, it'll just automatically. The other thing I would probably also have to check is if the game is over. So I put game is over, do nothing. Because usually this will happen. When the game is over, the stuff will destroy. And let me see. Is this card in play as well? Because this will also, if I'm the guy that summons and I'm dying, I don't want it to spawn myself, or like, is this card in play? Is it? I don't want to like spawn myself as I'm dying and cause issues. Like, yeah, it could try to access like a null reference, or like, oh, as it's being destroyed, it'll say, oh, this card is destroyed, and you're still trying to access its components, and so we don't want to do anything. Okay, so then, okay, so now that you know how these work, right? We have it's a pair, right? And that's why we needed the tool that creates the tool. Uh, the nice thing about this tool right here that has that script wizard, and you can go back and rewind and check it, is that it creates the pairs. If you go back and look at the link to Unity, this Chop Chop tutorial, I don't think they have this wizard. Or what they have is the two event listeners, scriptable objects that you have to create manually. So it gets very tedious because you have to make sure that they both match. This tool does it for you. It creates a tool that then has the listener pair with the event, and then all you have to do is create the scriptable object and then rename it. So if I want to create another single parameter string event, I can do that, and I can say another single parameter, whatever I want to call it, right? But that's the idea. We created a tool that creates, or we created a scriptable object that we can reuse for multiple purposes. And so hopefully that gives you an idea of how this works, because when I first Austin introduced this tool to me, it was very hard to grasp my mind around it and how to name it and how to use it. But now that I've been using it more and more, I love it, and it made my developing career a lot easier. So I enjoy it. I love it. I use it all the time now. Crypto objects are amazing. Okay, now removing the card. Since we're already here, let's go dive into that. I'm going to show you one problem that we've had with removing cards from the network field was that because it was a multiplayer and it was like I was dragging things out and in, it was removing and adding at the same time. One thing that I had a problem with is that it did not seem to remove from the right network field. It seemed to remove from other things. And so there was a lot of moving parts that made it very complicated for me. So I want to show you. I'm going to try to run as fast as possible through this so that you can understand. So I created this event. I said, okay, I need an event to remove a card. And what information do I need? I need int for the location of the field I'm removing, because there's either 0, 1, or 2. So each network field here has a location. And so the game, I'm gonna tell the game manager to remove my card. Okay. And so I need the int of the field, the string of the card to remove, and the boolean to know if it's the first player or the second player. Okay. I know you might be thinking, well, can't you just like go up the chain or like give references? But I tried doing that and it got super complicated. So this was now what I showed you works. It's not the most ideal scenario, like I said. I would do it a little bit different, but I want to show you how this helps. And we're going to go over this remove part because what happens is I made the dragging. Okay, it's the same dragging as before. Click and drag logic. We have the on render instead of update, and we check if it's a state authority first, and then we check is it movable. If so, we do the drag. But in order to network the position, remember we have a on location variable, so we needed to change that. So that's the first thing to make sure that happened. And then in here we have the on selected. Remember the other card, when we select the card, we click on it, we got to check if it has state authority, and then we to the local player controls, we say, hey, we already have a card selected. And this is where it starts getting finicky, because like this is where you saw me getting stuck, is that if the card gets put in, sometimes like there's errors, card doesn't get sent back. Anyways, this is when it gets selected and it says, okay, this is the initial position where you want to send it. And you're going to start dragging, and we're going to disable the collider so that it doesn't detect. Okay, so again, this is the same as before, just a little bit of tweak. We have the mouse up, start a drag, and then the card is not selected. We look at the mouse position. Then this is where we start the can we remove stuff. And it does the same thing as before. So in here we have this. I wanted to make sure we had it in a different function because I had to do a lot of testing. But we do array cast the same as before. We check if the component is a zone. We check if what the zone is, and it says, okay, get the move cost. So this is because each card has an ability, like we said before, and we check, okay, what's it says pay 2 favor to move. Okay, so it has 2, so it returns 2. If not, it'll return 10 for because they shouldn't be able to move. But anyway, so if we can move it, get the move cost. Again, remember there's a lot of complications on this, and I'm gonna go over the abilities in a second. It's just super simple. The abilities is not a big deal. I just wanted to get you an idea of where, since we're already here with the card, and then in here we have the event channel. Okay, so this is the event channel. So we raise the event, and this question mark just basically said like is to make sure that it checks for null. So it's a nice way of checking for null, checking if there's multiple ones. So if there's 5 event channels, I'll go through all of them. But this will raise the event. So question mark is a good way to check so that if it's null, it's not going to do anything. And then if so, this removes the card. It moves the card. Okay, so we're moving the card to the zone. And if not, we're going to return false, and we're going to send it to the initial location, and we're going to, regardless of what happens, we're going to enable the collider again, just in case. And so with the polish, if something gets stuck, I need to like double check this, like see where it's failing, what's going on. So let's check. I'm going to check the abilities really quick so you don't get lost. And then we'll go back and go into, because there's a lot of stuff that I had to do. It was crazy. And that's why I want to make another video with specifics on things for job interviews and other things, because I really learned a lot of things that I want to share with you guys. But that's for the next video. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go over this, the abilities and the moving part. Then we'll talk more. But basically, I decided, okay, we have a ton of abilities. We have some summon when maybe it's, the name is wrong. It's basically when the card is being summoned. It means, okay, we need to check something. We have ongoing abilities and we have movement abilities. Maybe now in retrospect, I don't need to check if they have any of them. So maybe I don't need this ability type. I think I'll eventually take it out. And instead just have all these be, okay, if you have these abilities, then I mean, obviously, if you have a summon ability, you like, anyways, movement. Some of them I do check, but I'll tell you later. So maybe we do need this just in case. Because for example, if in the cards that move, if you have a movement ability, I give ownership to the second player because I know that the second player is going to need it to move the card around. Now, in retrospect, I'm just going to give the second player ability ownership of all the cards regardless. So that's why I'm saying I might not need this anymore to check what type of ability. Okay, so we have you either summon, ongoing, and we can add more abilities as required. Then we have the summon abilities, the ongoing abilities, like things that are continually going on. So like this could pop up anytime during the match. This is specifically when the card is summoned. So when the card is spawned, I need to check these. And so I'm going to go through these movement abilities specifically for like moving from place to place or moving anything, and then ongoing abilities. Yeah, that's basically it. You can change them how you want, but these are the types of abilities that we have so far. Super straightforward. They're just enums, and I just check them, and I have them in here. So each card has drop down of what kind of abilities we have. Cards here we see we have these as public variable, so we can just you can only have one of each. So you could have one of all these, but you don't really need to. So I have the none as a way of saying okay, it has none of these um, at default. But you could say that I don't need any of these. I just do abilities in general and just check them one by one. That could be another thing too. Um, let's see. So now let's go back to the network card, and this is where you might have to like do a lot of pausing. I'm trying to be as quick as possible to not bore you to death. If you want to see these faster ×2 speed, but I want to make sure because oh my gosh, this was the hardest thing I had to do. You saw that I was able to move things, and it looks like 2 seconds but I'm telling you, it was hard. Like there was a lot of debugging, a lot of patience doing this. So I hope you guys appreciate me sharing this with you. Um, it was just crazy. So I want to go over stuff like let's go down the rabbit hole. Okay, so then we move card thing. Oh yeah. So we have this in here. This is the start in the zone. One thing that I want to share with you guys in here we added some variables that I want to share with you as you went over. Is it movable? Card info, as you saw, the local player controls for the who owns it, and I made it public, but I didn't need to. The field location, because we needed, and it needed to be networked. So we did these things, and I had the current zone. I don't need it anymore, and so that's what was one thing that in here it has is movable for the movement time. If it's movable, then later what I do for the second player, if it has the ability, I request ownership. So in here, what I'm gonna do instead is I'm always gonna, if it's not the first player, I just don't care about this. I'm just gonna give ownership to the second player if they have it. That way, those ally death, regardless, because that way every time the second player card that dies, it'll be the second player that owns it. Okay, so this is, I don't need this anymore. And this is the field location. I was debugging, don't need that anymore. But yeah, so this is the setup. Let's go back down. Now we can dive deep. Okay, so we have the move cost, because we need to get that. Then we need the field location. So then we're gonna go in. We have the field location. The field location is set up at the beginning when the card is spawned and when the card is moved. That's another thing I need to make sure. So adjust move card. So this is how, like, there's some variables that I need to make sure, like, okay, we need to give it a new network field, because there's a new network field, a new location, and there's a spawn location and a field location, right? So we say, okay, like, these things need to be, and this card, if you gain +2 is every time it moves. So here's the cost, right? So all these things need to be happening every time the card moves. Now, when the card spawns, we have all these variables, right? And so this is kind of like the counterpart to that. It's just when we move the card, we need to adjust certain things, where the field is, because we're going to tell it to remove that. And so these are things that, as things were getting broken, I needed to remember or add, right? This field location is very important because networked, it needs to be updated. Okay. And so we have that. Okay, so that's that. And now we're going to go into the zone. So the zone is the one that we hit. The other thing that I don't think it's in here that we needed to make sure is that what happens if you're in the same zone that you let go in? It shouldn't. So I think one thing that we do check is down here, like here, right here. Can we move the? I think in here in the zone, it will check if it's the same. But anyway, so let's go. So we have state authority. Remember, we had these before. This is like a copy paste from the previous one. It's like, do we have enough room? Do we have? Is the field done? Like, is the game done? Is the field being destroyed? Can we move? So this is the one I added. Like, okay, so if we can't move the card, we return. So can we move the card? The move cost, we need to check, do we have enough favor? And then current field location. Okay, so we are in this field. Is this the correct place? Like, because we don't want to be able to move in the same zone. So we're saying, okay, if the field we're moving it to is the same one, the zone is in the same field, we don't need, like, return, because it's in the same, we're trying to move to the same location. So we want to move from one location to the other one. The current favor, do we have enough? And then we round and check true or false. If we have enough, we return. Okay, we don't do anything, only if we don't have it. Then we go back here. Okay, now we're ready to move, right? We used to have this RPC, and this wasn't working. So I use this channel, and we're gonna, so let's go over. So this channel, again, it's a reference, and I know I have it in here. So I have here, let me show you. Here we have a listener, int string boolean, no callback event. Let's remove car from the field. As you can see, let me move. Here you can see we have the manager, and it says remove card from field. And this is an RPC, because we have to, this RPC, this function has to be available for everyone. Because remember, we have the second player and the first player, both are going to call these now, because the card can be moved by the first or second player. This is where I'm talking about the things can get confusing, because the moment, remember, when I first did all the functionality, it was that the first player always had control. And so it was super simple. I never had to wonder who had it, where it was, and what was going on. But now, because some cards had the second player and some are the first, I have to be aware and conscious of who's doing what. So we can't just willy-nilly say, okay, do this, do that. It's a multiplayer game, and only the first player has authority over the game manager and the fields. Okay, so let's dive into this. I can show you, and I'll move my back. Okay, in here, we have. Oh yeah, so the event was. Let me go back in here. Not see it here. Remove RPC. Remove there. Right, that's remove card from the field. I go to remove card from the field. Bum, bum, bum. Remove. Okay, so field modifications. It's basically the field location, the network ID. Oh, the other thing, again, I forgot to mention this. We use the network ID because this is a network card, and I need to make sure that whether the first or second player delete the card is not, because you can have two of the same cards within the same zone, and I didn't want to have that problem. Even though it's like a very small likelihood, I wanted to make sure that the card that I'm picking or removing is the right card, because I don't want to grab, if I have two Hermes in the same zone and I grab one, it will try to remove both or the first one that it sees. And that might not be the right one. It might not be the one that I'm holding. So network ID gives me the ID that's across both network objects. So it just, regardless of who receives it, I know it's the right card. I also have to make sure that, so this RPC says, okay, it can come from anyone, and it will go to the state authority. So it will come to the state authority. So it might be called twice, it might be called multiple times. I have to be aware of that when I say all. But I know that only the state authority is the one calling the shots on here for removing. So it will only be raised once. Because again, this, okay? So it will only happen once per card as it's being dragged. And it will, it can happen multiple times. So for example, if I'm playing with the first player and the first player has a Hermes card that can move, and I have one too, and we both are moving the card, this effect will, or this call is going to happen for both cards. But again, the event channel helps it so that it doesn't move the wrong card. It has a specific network ID. So that's why we needed those parameters. Okay, so we have the current field, remember field location, and we say, okay, we get the component, the network field, and remove network card. So now we remove this specific card that has the specific network ID. Don't need this debug anymore. And we say, is this the first player or the second player? Because we need that as we go to remove. Okay, so the other thing that I did that I modified on this was that I created two different lists. We used to have one big list of cards. So I'm going to show you in here. We used to have one. This wasn't here before. When we spawned the card, we used to have one list. Now I make sure to have, and these lists of cards are only on the first player, because the first player is the only one that has authority over the fields. So that's one thing that when debugging I didn't realize. I needed to be aware, is that this first player is the one controlling the cards in the field. So at no point in the game does the second player know which cards they have where. Okay, so, and we needed to separate this so that way when we readjusted the numbers or the powers or remove cards, we didn't remove the wrong card by accident or shuffle the other cards from the other side. And so we need to make sure there's player 1 cards and player 2 cards. And this is per field per zone. So this is like zone 1, player 1 zone and player 2 zone. So that's one thing we changed. So in here, we're always checking which player we have. Because that, by checking this Boolean, we reduce the amount of cards we have to go through, right? Because it cuts it in half. So now we say, okay, if it's the first player's cards, we check these cards. If not, we check these, okay? And we remove it from the card. If we have a hash set, we could just remove the specific card, but this made it easier because what we do is now we check the power, recheck the power, and readjust. This is due to the abilities. As you noticed before, I think I went over these abilities and we added. So we had some field abilities. So we had to do power checks. So we have if the cards have inverted power, if we have half the power, all these things have to be taken into account. So I can't just remove the number, right? Like if you say, oh, I just subtract 6 or remove 6, because I don't know what the power check is. So I had a remove power function, but I decided to just scrap it and just say, okay, I'm not going to deal with like figuring out inverted and whatnot. So what I did is I say, okay, I'm going to recheck the power. I'm going to set it at 0, and we're going to do it again as if they were spawning again, right? So we've removed the card that we don't need anymore. We're just going to go through each one and give it the current power. Check the field spell. I don't want to do any math. I don't want to have to like double check. It's just clean slate, rehash, and figure it out again. Okay. So that's what we did, because again, we have these powers, like it could get pretty crazy, right? So we could have like 50 different summoning powers that shift, the field can be shifted in so many ways. That's something that we have to figure out, right? So I wanted to keep it straightforward. I don't want to have to like do one-off math. Then we have shuffle cards. This is the placement, right? Because if we have a Hermes in the second spot and we move it out, now we need to shuffle all the cards back. So that way the latest count is there. So when we spawn a card, we have the space. So that's, again, we reset the zone. It sets the count to 0. That's all it does. We don't need this bug anymore. Again, see, like I was going crazy in some of these. And I was just like, is this resetting? Is it adding? I think in here, let me check. One thing that was going crazy is moving the card and the next location, but these were separate scenarios. So what happened is, I'm going to show you. What happens is, okay, I'm going to reshuffle the cards. And in order to do that, I need to make sure that the next location, I get the current location. So I say, okay, give me the location. I should say get next location. This is not a good naming convention. Get the location. Target. Okay, so now I'm gonna get debugging, get card location. Okay. So what happens is it gives me the card location, and then it increments the count by 1 so that the next time I get it is in the right location. And the reason I want to do that is because that's how the zone works. So that way, the next time I spawn a card, everything's working the same. And then we do per card, I say set spawn location. So this set spawn location, it's so that I can give it the location correct. And this is so that, because remember, the first player is the one creating these functions, right? So we have to, again, this is something that I ran into that I wasn't aware, and I had to like debug and figure out. But okay, I'm the first player. If the second player is the one moving the card, the first player is doing all the algorithms for removing the card from the list. But then, okay, this, I can't give it the spawn location unless I have state authority. So I need to do this back so the first player can tell the second player that this location has that change to that, and then the state authority would align all the cards to the same one. So again, when I mean second player to first player, because the second player doesn't have the first player doesn't have state authority these cards, because we changed it, right? Because the second player has authority. So that fixes this right here. And then again, yeah, it's a lot. Like when I go through this, it makes sense. And this is where tutorials, someone like, if I was doing this for a class, right, and or a Udemy course, they would probably go through all this and go back and make it better, right? I would change this to be better, and then I would go back and say, oh, this is how you do this and that, and then you would never have seen this. But I like you to see some of these things and how I was thinking and the mistakes I made, so that you can understand where the decisions come from. I find it very valuable, and that's why I'm gonna, in the next video, I'm gonna talk more about this and how you can do this for, like, how does this affect your career as a game developer? What you can use it for job interviews. Reset zone count, it's all the same. This is for the second player. The second player needs to specifically set the zone count. This was a one-off where I was having problems getting the current card count, because, like I said before, the zones are local, and there is nowhere where the second player is able to tell which card, like the count, the card count in that zone. Again, because in here, if you notice, if you go back here, we reset the zone count, but that's only for the first player, and the zones are not networked. So there's no way I don't have anything to do. And so this was the last piece of the puzzle that I had to figure out. So I have an RPC that will then say, okay, tell the player to zone in the other zone to update the count. and whatever that count is the same count as I ended up with this, right? So like there's zone 2, our location. Remember, we're adding this current card count, we're going up, but this is only on the first player. So we need to sync it up with the second player, and I just did an RPC call, and that worked once. So this was one of the last like things that I did, and it was hard to figure things out. Like I said, it requires patience and logic to go through things and say, okay, this is what's supposed to happen. And if it doesn't happen, you need to understand, okay, if this is not happening, where is it going wrong? And you have to follow the logic. That's why I'm showing you where the logic is. Okay, so we went through the whole removing, right? This was just if we go back to the network card, this is just from this one event, removing card. Okay, now we're gonna go into moving the card into the zone, right? So it's crazy, and it was the hardest thing I've done in this setup. Zone, move card to zone. Target slots, spawn position. We have these are pretty straightforward because all we're doing is the same logic as the spawning. It's just a little bit different, right? So we're adding the card, and again, this current card count goes up. This is in that zone. So we have this function for adding the network card. This is one thing that I had to make sure. If the field is not set and I'm moving it to the field, it needs to like flip the field. Get the field started, do all the same things as we did before. Then if it's the first player card, these are like, don't need that. We're adding it to the first player card pile, right? Then adding the power. If it's not, we have the player 2 cards, and we add the power. So the power is the same as always. We have the power card. This could be named better, like the power, the strength of the card. But we're just adding everything into this network field. I'll show you, but it's as always. We have the power. If it has that ability to move, again, this is on the network field, right? Because if we had the ability, we needed to make sure we add a power, like because we haven't added this yet. The card just moved. We're spending the favor because we have access to game manager. We finally move the card. We're moving the card. It cost us 2 favor, and it grants us power of 2. So the powers added to this will be 2. So then we add that in case the field has like a half power, it would add 1 instead of 2. Is the first player, and if it's not, it's the second player. It will add the power to the right. Okay, so that's the add power with this movement ability. If the card info had the movement, so that's the only difference. I added this movement ability, and then also I have this boolean to see if it moved. Because I wanted to reuse this for spawn. So like this is for the spawning, right? If we spawn the card, we haven't moved it. I don't want to add 2 every time it spawns that card. Okay, so we have to check if this actually moved. So it has to have the movement ability, and it had to have movement. Okay, and then we use. But again, I don't need the card ability move. I could just check this specific move for now. But anyways, this is a setup. That's what it is. Okay. Okay, so first player, second player, and then this is specifically for who has authority of that card. Again, this RPC is different. This one is called on everybody. Okay, it's a network field. It'll be called on every single player by any player. So if the second player is moving the card, it will say, second player, I need to add this card. And in here, the first player is the one that has authority. Okay, so all this stuff is stuff that we have to do regardless of who's doing it. So whether I'm the second player or the first player, it will do this, period. Now, we need, each card needs to do something when it's moved. Like for example, in this case scenario, that card gets added a power. It also, we need to adjust because we just moved it. So it has a different spawn location, has a different zone. It could have different things, right? If the field affects the card, we need that card to be affected by the field. So this is what this like show text, show face down, all these things have to be changed. And this is something that I would need to talk to my friend about. Like for example, if the card has to be flipped down, what happens if the card is flipped down? Can they be moved, right? Because how do you know if a card can be moved? And so that's the things that we're like, or do we show it face down for the other player but not you, right? Because you should be able to see your own cards and be able to move them. But does that give away what card it is? And like, there's a lot of conflicts between movements and whatnot. But that's where it gets messy. Has state authority. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm not checking state authority of the network field. I already know. I'm checking the state authority of the card. because I need to update that card and it needs to be updated by the owner. And so that's why I made this available on everybody, because I need the second player. If the second player is moving a card, the first player is gonna do its thing, and then the second player needs to also do some setup because okay, like we just moved this card. Where did we move it to? Okay, well we moved it to this location. This is the player zone. This is the tag, the field stuff, and so all this stuff is just a read. It's reading on the network field, but it needs to be applied to the card. Okay, and so that's what we're doing here. It's like, am I the first player or am I the second player? And then in here is the end of everything. But this is the first stuff that I did. Like this is probably some of the first things that I did, and then it trickled up to what you saw. Right? I didn't go in order because I had no idea what I was doing. I had to add the card ability, give it a power +2, figure out where to put it, do the location, and then slowly I was like adding things as I was going. Look, I have a whole thing. I think it's in here. I had it commented out, and so like this stuff removed from previous field. I had things that were working, some things that weren't. In here, I had whole functions in here. Remove network card. Like I started with this, with an RPC to remove the card, and this was it gave me a headache. Now I can delete it because it's not working. And so it took a lot of work, but that's it. It seems pretty logical. Like we have remove and then we add. It's a simple concept. It's just hard to grasp when you have a lot of moving pieces. And this is just 2 players. 2 players is super easy because it's either one or the other. Multiple players is a lot harder and it can get confusing. But hopefully this give you an idea of how it works. I learned a lot. Next video, we're going to go over specifically how this all applies, and I'm gonna add more abilities and show you, maybe adjust the art design so I can give you the project, and I'll put it up in my community, the endgame devs, to help anyone that needs help making games. The other thing, I'm gonna post a link to the Chop Chop video, or the Chop Chop, the Unity stuff, so that you can look up that for the scriptable objects. If you like it, please like the video and subscribe. If there's anybody that needs help, please lead them to this YouTube videos and channel. If there's any questions you have about making games or anything that you have questions about that you're struggling with, put them in the comments in any of my videos. I will read them, and if I have time, I'll make a video for you on solving the problems that you might have.